Yo, this hot, this the spot, there it is, pod.com. We're interviewing the best comedians, so tune in quick and get your ears receiving them. We talking about life and laughter stream right to you, from the microphone right to your home, dude. Side note, this might get embarrassing, but no, don't sweat, yo, cause there it is.
Welcome to the There It Is podcast, a podcast for comedy creators of any stripe. I'm your host, Jason Farr. Let's do this. Thanks so much for listening, especially if this is your first time, no matter who you are. If you haven't yet subscribed to the podcast, please do. You can on iTunes and SoundCloud. Also leave a review and follow us on Twitter and Facebook at There It Is Pod. I love getting feedback, and I've gotten some great feedback so far, so thank you, and continue to give feedback. Today's episode is with Los Angeles actor, writer, director Brian James O'Connell, who is also an improviser and instructor at the I.O. West out in Los Angeles. He's phenomenal. He was just in South Carolina for the New South Comedy Festival here in Greenville, enthroned by Alchemy Improv Comedy, and he did some amazing shows, and I took some really great workshops from him and knew he was the kind of person I'd love to talk to about improv. He is like me when it comes to ideating and thinking about this sort of stuff, but better at it. I am thrilled that he has been able to be on this podcast. And I'm thrilled to share it with you. People like him are who inspired me to start a podcast about picking the brains of greats. It's a pretty free-flowing and informative chat with some good nuggets of knowledge, so strap in and get ready. We pack a lot in. There was a minor technical snafu, though. It's the first one of the podcast. If you notice a change in how he sounds, it's not your headphones. It's not that distracting. You'll still be able to enjoy the episode. Here's my chat with Brian O'Connell. Where did you get your start? Was it at I.O. West, or were you out in Chicago?
No, I got my start in I.O. West. My entire family's from Chicago, but I was born and raised in North Carolina. So I didn't even know what long form improv was. Me, improv was just what I saw on television with whatchamacallit, Whose Line Is It Anyway? Right. And I thought that was what improv was, and that it was only accessible to famous people or to people that had been in some sort of mythical training that wasn't available to me, because there was no improv theaters. There was basically, when I was growing up, there's basically no comedy clubs at all, like even stand up or anything like that, because I'm from a very small town in North Carolina. So I was living in Los Angeles, and a girl that I dated in college, Rebecca Brown, who is now Rebecca Sinarski, she invited me to see her show. She was like, "Hey, will you come see my improv show?" And I went, "Yeah, sure. When is it?" And she's like, "Oh, it's Sunday night at 11." And I was like, "Well, I don't have HBO, so I won't be watching The Sopranos or 6 Feet Under or anything." So like, "Yeah, sure." And I went and saw it, and they just happened. Remember it? That was January 19th of 2003, and they just happened to have the greatest show they had ever done. I remember watching it going, "I want to do this. What is this? What's this magical thing?" And so like after the show, I ran downstairs to the box office. I was like, "How do I do this? How do I sign up for classes? I hear that there's a school here." And they're like, "Oh, you just missed sign up for classes for like 2 weeks, but you can call the office the next day." And I did it Monday at noon on January 20th. I called and said, "I want to do this." And they said, "Classes start March 1st. And I said, "Yeah, put me down." And so that was March 1st, 2003. I had my first level 1 class with Paul Valancourt. And I never looked back. And then over the next year, as I started to do more research and go online and find out things, I found the Improv Resource Center, those message boards, and run by Kevin Mullaney, and YesAnd.com, run by Asaf Ronan. And then I realized that Chicago was the birthplace, the mecca of improv. And then I got real mad at my family
for never taking you out.
Yeah, I was like, "You sons of bitches. All those family reunions, all those summer vacations going to Chicago, never once did anyone, none of my cousins were like, 'Hey, Brian likes comedy. Let's take him to a Second City show.'" I was like, "You assholes." I could have that when I think back because my Aunt Kathy, who I love to death and is also my godmother, when I think back that I could have been 16, I got my Aunt Kathy in Chicago for 6 weeks, which she would have loved.
Yeah.
And I could have taken the iOS summer intensive. Heather Ann Campbell took it when she was, took classes in Chicago when she was 15. When I think of all those people that got that start and got exposed to it in high school, I was like, and think of how much further along I could be in my training. I'm 10 years behind for no reason other than just no one in my family in Chicago said, "Hey, there's this thing." I'm mostly joking. Like I'm not furious with it, but there are days where I'm just like, shit.
Well, I wish I could have done it. I have the same feeling because I've only been doing it for 3.5 years, and
yeah, I
could have been doing it. I didn't know about long form the way I grew to know about it myself. So I had a very similar experience to you, is that I was just watching Whose Line Is It Anyway? And that was what improv was to me, which is fun to watch, but it didn't ever inspire me to do it. And then I did take an improv class in college, but that was because it was an elective for my minor, because I was a theater minor. So it seemed like it would be a fun class to take. But, when it came to long form, it wasn't until, not even 10 years ago when I first saw ASCAT and thought, oh my gosh, I want to do that.
Yeah. Where did you see ASCAT? Were you visiting?
It was on Netflix. I saw.
The old Bravo special where they did two.
Well, I saw the Bravo special second. That was the one where Tina Fey and Andy Richter sat in with them. The Netflix thing is what their DVD is, which is the one with Andy Daly and Horatio Sands are with them. And when I saw UCB, that was when I wanted to go into long form as well. And I am surprised to hear that you started in 2003 and that you don't have that extra 10 years that you're saying you missed, because watching you would think, oh, this guy's been performing for 25 years.
Well, I made up for it by being a psychopath and really having it take over my life, because I did sort of, I guess part of that was because I knew that I had so much, in my mind, I had catching up to do. But also improv became so important to me because I always say improv saved my life, and that's not hyperbole. It was the first thing I ever found that told me it was okay for me to be me, and not getting too deep into it or too dark into it. Not that I mind, but it's just like, I've talked about it on other podcasts. People can go find it. So I went really into it. There's an old business axiom that I use all the time. It's the quality triangle: fast, cheap, and good. Pick two,
right?
Because that's all you're getting. I wanted to be good fast, so I knew it would not be cheap. And I was there at IO 4 to 5 nights a week, watching 4 to 5 hours of improv a night. Wow. And just soaking in. And then when I met Miles, my mentor, Miles Stroff, I met Miles in level 5. So October of 2003. So 13 years ago, when I met the old man, and then the first 5 minutes of his class, I was like, "Shut up, take my money. Whatever you're selling, I'm buying," because it just clicked for me. And then so the stuff that's working with him, and the sort of the philosophies that he had to it, because no one thinks more about improv than the old man. Just no one does. That's what he does. He teaches it. He runs the theater. But when he goes home at night and puts his kids to bed and goes out to the back patio and has a Bud Light, and he'll just stare off into the distance and just constantly be thinking about improv. So that's kind of what I did, because I wanted to be good at this. It was so important to me, and so I missed a lot of birthday parties. And I still do a lot of that. I work on improv every day. But I've also pulled back and realized, weirdly enough, I got this. This is a piece of advice that I got from an Ice-T song called "You Played Yourself," back in the old Freedom of Speech record, where he's like, it's this one line where he's talking about other MCs that don't have anything to talk about because they dropped out of high school. Mm-hmm. He's like, there's only so much you can rap. And he's like, I think the line is like, "You flunked science, math, and history." The idea of drop science. Why not? You're going to run out of things to say about cars and money and girls. What do you actually have to say? And it kind of goes back to another. I brought that in with another piece of advice that Miles gave me, and everybody. I think this is the first thing he says on the Delmonic interviews, that documentary. So the idea is the secret to being a better and more interesting improviser is being a better and more interesting person. And you have to live life. You have to go and see things. You have to study art and literature and history and science and be generally inquisitive, not only of book learning, but also of people learning, of being generally wanting to know what's going on in other people's lives, being fascinated with what they do, even if they think it's boring, right? It's not boring. It's not boring to you because that's new information. If someone works in middle management at a pen company, that's boring as shit to them. But it's interesting to me because I am not in middle management at a pen company.
Right.
I want to know more of that stuff. So I've dialed it back now because you realize that you have to have a good meal every once in a while. You have to be empathetic to other people. You have to have kindness and sympathy and be out there exposed to stuff, because if all you do is go to improv shows and all you do is improv shows, all your improv shows will be about improv, and that's boring.
Right.
We're supposed to be doing stuff about the human condition, and if you're not out there living like a human, I don't know what you're going to talk about.
Yeah, and you're also trying to, if you're an actor or an improviser, you're trying to exhibit the human condition, and if you aren't observing it or experiencing it in real life, then you're going to have a really hard time. That's one of the things that I learned a long time ago, was essentially what you're saying, is that you grow as a person through art because it forces you to tear down walls and to actually live life and experience things with people. And if you are not going to be as good of an artist if you aren't doing that. And so if you want to be a good artist, you better start tearing down some of those emotional blocks and walls that we put up around ourselves to save us, so we think, from the outside world. But it's not going to help you in any realm, the art realm or the real world. I noticed, and I'm wondering your take on this. Do you think that in this internet age, when everyone's looking at cell phones or screens, they're looking at screens all day and they're not really interacting with people, have you noticed any difference with how people who come from that world or have gotten really adapted to that, have you noticed any change in how they perform?
Not really. I think a lot of that stuff is overblown, and I think it's part of mythology. There's a great photograph I saw not too long ago. It's from like the early 1920s, I believe. It's everyone on the subway, on the train, where back when things actually looked like trains, when we think of trains, like old-timey trains. But that's, it's just a subway. It was an elevated train. It's everybody on their way to work, and they're all reading the paper.
Reading a newspaper, right.
Yeah, because there was an early edition, there was an early edition, there was a morning edition, there was a late edition, right? Because that's how news happened, and newspapers had been. So if you wanted to be interconnected to the world, you had to get that morning paper to find out what the fuck was going on in the world.
Right.
So the idea now of people saying like, oh, everyone's looking at their phones. There's another one that just came out where it was a meme that had gotten disproved. It was I think it was a bunch of students, like young people, looking at clearly teenagers, looking at their cell phones while there's like a beautiful, I think like a Van Gogh or something in the background. They're clearly in a museum, and the short-sighted meme was like, look at all these young kids just don't understand. Look at these millennials. They got this beautiful piece of art behind them, and they're all on their phones playing their video games. It's like. And then it got disproved. It was like, actually, no. What it is that they're at a national museum. They had just spent a ton of time looking at that painting and being awestruck by its beauty. And because the museum has such a wonderful interactive app that goes along with the museum, so you could learn more information on that. What they were all doing is that their teacher had instructed them to sign on to that app and take a test. They were all taking a test to learn more about the beautiful painting and the artist that had done it. I'm not sure if it was Van Gogh or not. So to me, there's always more of that. So this idea that like young folks, are millennials and they whine and they don't have it. It's like, on the one hand, I'm like, I was 19. I was a fucking know-it-all. I thought my shit didn't stink. That's just called being young.
Right.
It's just older people not realizing that was their thing. You have to remember at a certain point, rock and roll, like just Elvis. Elvis is so tame to us now comparatively.
But that was so controversial.
Yeah.
When he hit the scene.
Yeah. Right. And at the same time, it's just like, that's the evolution. And anyone that longs for those days don't remember how shitty it was for a lot of people during those days. So,
Right.
And also too, like, like, oh, they're entitled, these millennials. I'm like, you know what? They're not entitled. Maybe they're just not going to accept the bullshit experience that they've been handed to them. Maybe they're just not going to accept the fact that they have to go to college and then start their lives $80,000 or more in debt. Right? Maybe that is not acceptable to them, and they're pushing back against it. It's the same way that everyone bitches about, like, all these kids. You know what's wrong with these kids? They all got participation trophies when they got out. They never been hard.
I hate that whole thing because I hear people who are my age say that same thing, and we got participation trophies when we were kids.
Who gave them participation trophies? The adults.
Yeah.
Blame yourself. They're 5. They didn't all get together and on the soccer team be like, all right, so before we start this game, we just agree that we all get participation trophies. No, the adults, their parents gave that to them.
Right.
Who are the same people bitching about it?
Well, yeah.
You fucking gave it to them.
That's very true, but then there are people who grew up on participation trophies who are complaining about this young generation growing up on participation trophies. Well, so did you. You can't say anything if you did too. Like that's, it's, I do think some of that is overblown.
It's the hypocrisy. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, to go back to something you were saying about Miles, about how he thinks about improv all day, I'm someone who, I'm not saying I think about it as much as he does, but I do like to
no one does.
Right, exactly, yeah. I do like to ideate, though, and I do like to come up with ideas, and I'll try to write notes and come up with things, figure out things, very much for the reason that you were bringing up earlier about you were playing catch-up. That's me playing catch-up. But how does someone who thinks about improv all day transfer that to doing good scene work? Because I can have ideas and things like that, but when it comes to actually practicing the skill or exhibiting the skill in an improv show, how do you transfer it?
You're already doing it. There is no magical, mythical next step. You're working that muscle. It's already affecting your improv positively because you're thinking about it. And you're doing it, and you're like, whether it's keeping a journal or running exercise by yourself. It's Miles and I have talked about this a lot in the last year or so, where it's the myth of stage time. Like, oh, I'll get better once I get more stage time. It's like, no, stage time is part of it, but you're going to think. Even now, I think about improv and write ideas and do exercise like 10 times as much as I'm actually physically on stage, right? So all that, just by simply, this is practice. You thinking about it, writing down ideas, that is already going to translate into good scene work. It's just such a slow, gradual process that you can't, it's like evolution or the tides or erosion or the stratification of rock layers in the Grand Canyon. You're not going to see the immediate results. It's that frog in the cold pan of water with the heat slowly turned up. Even though I found out a couple of years ago that that's not true. that's not an actual exercise. Like, if your frog dives, you'll never feel it. Like, no, he'll feel it. He'll feel it, and he'll hop out of there like wave it because he's an amphibian, and water and temperature is kind of his thing.
Right.
You're not, but
you're saying that the process is the progress, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's hard. It's like doing a deconstruction, being in the opening scene, and then turning around and then doing a thematic scene off of your own character. You're too close to it. You're standing too close to the mirror. You can't possibly realize how that stuff is working. So you just already doing that stuff is already working. It's already translated itself into good scene work. It's just so gradual and minuscule. It might just be a second here or half of a line here. It's already working. You're just too close to see it. You know who does see it? People. I guarantee you keep doing this stuff 3 months from now, someone's going to come up to you out of the blue, non sequitur, out of left field, and be like, hey man, I just want to see, lately you've been killing it. Like, I just been watching the shows, and you seem really confident up there, and you got, and it'll be stunning to you. Even with me saying it right now, saying that is going to happen to you, when it happens to you, it's still going to be stunning to you because you're not going to, you don't see yourself that way. You just see the struggle.
Right. And that also, I guess, relates to taking workshops, and then outside of the workshop, maybe you don't get to practice what you were practicing in the workshop when you're with your team, but having taken the workshop and taken notes and looked over those notes is still progress for you.
Yeah, anyone on your team that has taken a workshop somewhere independent of the team and brings it back, that's part of the team now.
Yeah,
that's part of the team now because it has to be. You know, like I was teaching a class right now, and one of my students was like, "My team doesn't know any of position play." I'm like, "So what? If I do, like, how do I get them to do it?" I'm like, "Because you're doing it. They'll have to." You know what I mean? Like, they may not know the terminology, they may not know the technique, but just simply by doing it, simply by you doing it, and then yes-anding it, which it all, no matter what improv, it all comes back to yes and.
Right.
They'll do it. They may not be aware of it, right? But they're doing it because you're doing it. An improv team is a sum of its parts. It's always a sum of its parts, and we all come together to make that greater Voltron to make that thing happen. I'm a big fan of the band Fish. I used to travel around and follow them around and all that kind of stuff. And there's a great part in their book where they talk about the idea of truly, because they do a lot of improvisation, like truly to them what is improvising is that they believe, and I remember this distinctly, they believe that if they're playing in front of 10,000 people, right, one person more or less in that audience would completely change the temperature and the climate of the show. That it would absolutely change the vibe of the show, and they live it. Like Trey will spend an hour. Trey Anastasio, guitar player, will spend an hour before the show drawing up a set list, and he goes, I do it because it's part of the process on that. He goes, but I know, he's like, we've never played a single show that we got past song 3 of the set list. After that, it's checking the temperature of the crowd, what they're into, what they're not into. Is it more of a jazzy sort of night? I mean, and I truly believe that too. So if one person, it doesn't matter where I'm playing, one person, like at New South when I was there for the festival, doing that 3 Insane Rituals, that one-man show. If there had been one person more or less in the crowd, you would have seen a completely different show.
Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah. If I hadn't seen you in the front row when I fucked up and turned off the lights, I was like, oh, there's Jason Farr. There's I can do that. Right? If you hadn't been there, that would have been different. If you hadn't been there, it would have been a completely different show.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you did. You did make some jokes involving me.
Yeah.
There is, I guess, there are a lot of stand-ups who will say, "Oh, don't blame the crowd if a show doesn't go well." But there is some truth to the energy you're getting from the crowd and how the show goes. I mean, not necessarily. If you do a bad job, that's on you. But you can't blame the crowd for that.
I think the crowd is part of it because it's a dialogue, right? It's a back and forth on that. I also don't believe in blame the crowd when, like, I'll do that when I'm coaching a team and it's like, all right, the crowd wasn't into it or they didn't like it, and then afterwards, like, when we go into notes though afterwards, I never want to hear the team blame the crowd for their work. Right? Yeah, they just weren't into it tonight. You know, like, I think if they'd been more into it, our stuff would have worked. I'm like, if they would have been more into it if your stuff had worked, right? You know what I mean? Like,
right.
I also believe that I'm a big Henry Rollins fan. I got 3 tattoos. 2 of them are Rollins related. But he, in his book, Get in the Van, it's his diary that he kept during the days when he was touring with Black Flag. And there's a passage in there which I have sent to many an improv team that I have coached, where he talks about I think they were in like Tucson or something like that, somewhere in Arizona, and he was outside in the parking lot, like all bummed out because there weren't as many people there as there had been last year when they came to that show. And then Chuck Dukowski, who was the bass player, one of the founders of the band, came outside and was like, "What's your problem?" And he said it, and Dukowski just lit into him. He was like, "Fuck you, man." He's like, "It's not." He's like, "I don't care if we're playing to 5 people or 500. It's the people that showed up. It's not their fault that more people didn't show up, right? Whether it's 5 people or 500, you go out there and you play your fucking ass off because they came."
Exactly.
I have done many. I've seen improvisers and some of my heroes, as I've done shows with them on stage, and it's all like, there's only 4 people here. And I'm like, well, I'm going to blow those fucking 4 people's minds. I'm going to give them the best possible show that I can, because it's not their fault that other people didn't show up. Whether
Right.
it's marketing or promotion or it's fucking raining out, I don't care if it's an act of God. I'm going to blow those 4 people's mind, because those 4 are going to go out into the world and are going to speak hosannas about how great that show was. Dude, you should have been there. I couldn't believe how amazing it was. And it was like just for me. It was like me and 3 other guys. Like, I will do that. I've done crazy good shows. I've done crazy good shows for the fucking cocktail server and the light booth guy.
Right.
End of list. Right? I do not. I will crush it for them. That's an old Gene Simmons quote as well. Gene Simmons from Kiss. He was like, you know how many people were at the first Kiss show ever? 5. 4 waitresses and a bartender. You know how many people have told me over the years that they were at that first show? 250,000.
Yeah, I think that's a good
go out there and
discussion
kill
to have.
yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a really good discussion to have, to say we are going to go do our best show, because what you do is on, like I said earlier, is on you, really. I mean, that's, I understand wanting to have a big, fun crowd, but
right.
if you're doing, I mean, no one says, on a basketball team or a football team, if no one's in the crowd, they still have to run the plays correctly. And no one
they still have to
on
play the
that team,
game.
right, and no one on the team, if they lost the game because they didn't run the plays correctly, no one says because the crowd wasn't into it or there wasn't any crowd here. You still have plays to run. You still have things that you're supposed to do a particular way, whether you're doing improv or stand-up or you're a musician.
The paycheck's the same. You gotta go out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're getting paid. Obviously, improv. None of us get paid, or most of us don't get paid to do it. But you still got that stage time. You still given that opportunity.
Right.
You want to piss away. If nothing else, be selfish about it. Do you want to piss away this stage time opportunity and not give it your best so you can delay by one show getting better? Becoming finding a moment where you're gonna like just have like the explosion go off. I'm the same way when I watch quote unquote bad improv. I watch way more quote unquote bad improv than I ever do good improv on purpose. Because an old quote, Jimi Hendrix got busted once in a small London bar watching this like basically just a bar band, like a cover band. And he was in the back and he was trying to like just lay low, and someone recognized him and they're like, holy shit. And he talked about this in an interview. Someone was like, holy shit, you're Jimi Hendrix. What the fuck are you doing here watching this band? He's like, well, you never know, man. That guitar player might have a moment of genius. He might, it could just be 30 seconds. It could be 5 seconds. Maybe he stumbles upon a lick, or maybe he makes a mistake, and then he tries to play that mistake twice to turn it into something, and that might inspire me to write a song. So it's still all creativity, man. It's beautiful. And I just remember reading that going, I think I read that quote when I was like a year or 2 into improv. It was an interview I'd never seen before with Hendrix, and I was just like, man, if it's good enough for Hendrix,
right,
who the fuck am I? Who am I? So like people are like, hey, you were at like my level 5B grad show, like why? And I try and do the same thing. I try to like hide in the back, and so they like don't see me, because I don't want a student to be like, ooh, BOC's here. He was my teacher. And I don't want to put them in their head or anything like that. But I do kind of want to watch the light bulb go off. I'd much rather watch someone who's been doing it for 6 months and have a really clunky, awful, like not awful, but like, because I don't believe in good or bad improv. I don't believe in good or bad improvisers. All right, but they might have a clunky, and it's not really clicking, and they're kind of stepping over each other. It's just kind of a little clusterfucky. But I will watch that second beat where that one person does a walk-on and then walks back off again, and it's brilliant, and they don't know it. But at the end, when it's brilliant, it works, and then I see them walk off stage in the wings, and they're like, oh my God, that worked. Like having that look. I would much rather watch that than watch people that have been doing it for 25, 30 years, because it's brilliant and it's great and it's beautiful. But like, I know why it's good. I can see the technique but also like, but they're also comfortable and relaxed because they've been doing it for 25 years.
Right.
But also, especially for young improvisers, don't watch that stuff because it's discouraging. You I'll never be able to be as good as that. And like,
right.
Yeah, you're watching 12 seconds, but you're not watching 12 seconds. You're watching 25 years distilled into 12 seconds. They weren't always that good. Like,
right.
Like go and see, like if you're in level one of the place, go see the grad shows. Go see the stuff that is attainable, the stuff that's going to be you in a year or less. All right.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
If you only go see ASCAT and Armando and Quartet and Heather and Miles, if you only go see these people that are like just great, or Bass Prov, they're just crazy good, it will become disheartening because you'll feel like I'll never get there. Right?
Right.
Try and just walk across the room. Don't try and walk across the room first. Don't try and walk to France. Right?
That's a good way to put it. To go back to the thing about performing in front of a small crowd, but still giving it your all, how do you get into the mindset? Because it can be, if you're backstage and then you look out and see there's not that many people, it can, for many, be discouraging and make them not really get the guts maybe to give it their all. How do you get out of your head or prepare yourself to still fully get vulnerable and put your all into a show?
Well, for me, I always say, for me personally, I have the philosophy that you're only really playing for 2 or 3 people in the audience anyway. Whether it's a packed standing room only house or anything, the moments that are really connection is not when everyone laughs, not when it's this big guffaw. It's where it's just one guy in the back who's like, ha ha! That's the guy that got your reference, right? That's the guy that has a cousin who's just like, who acts the way that you act, right? That sort of moment of revelation, that aha moment. Or on the flip side of that, if you're being super vulnerable, if you're being really raw and naked with your emotions, the law of averages states, and it goes back to the thing I said, improv saved my life, right? I spent a decade of my life thinking about killing myself, like every day. The best acting you ever saw me do in my life was probably one of those days where I was acting like I didn't want to kill myself. So there's the law of averages states that there's at least one person in the crowd who's thinking about hurting themselves. And if you can buy them one more day with your comedy, that's who you're playing for. So if there are only 3 or 4 people in the crowd and you have a 7-person team, pick one person in the crowd. Pick that one person that you're trying to make their day. And maybe, hopefully that's a person who needed that day. You never know. People come, people that you don't know what people's journey was that day. Maybe they got a parking ticket that morning. Maybe they woke up and realized that the person that's sleeping next to them doesn't love them anymore. You have no idea. So play for that one person. Play for that one person. Try to get that one. I don't want a standing ovation from 100 people. I want a standing ovation from one person in 100 people. That person who's just like, this spoke to me and it means so much to me that I don't care that there's 100 other people here and they're not standing up. I'm standing up. Thank you for that. Right? That's what I'm playing for. That's how I do it.
I mean, I think we all can relate to times where we needed entertainment or art to bring us through the day, get us through the day. I've had depressions where watching Conan and Jimmy Fallon is what made me happy that day. It was maybe the only thing that made me happy that day, and that kept me going. That's pretty heavy to think about that. How do you, because the same is happening if you're coaching, one of those players might be in that same place, and you're trying to maybe challenge them to push themselves or move forward as people and as improvisers. So how do you approach it in that kind of setting?
I let them play through it. I had something similar to this actually just happen the other day. I don't stop and discuss it. That if I can see that they're struggling and are frustrated and even breaking the fourth wall and just turning and looking at me like, okay, because I do some side coaching here and there. Most of my side coaching is firm encouragement. You've got this. You can do this, right? I don't. It's positive, but I'm gonna be firm about it. I'll let them play through it. I'll let them use that frustration to inform their character. to use it. If you're feeling, your thoughts and feelings are valid. If you're thinking it, you're allowed to say it. If you're feeling it, you're allowed to be affected by it. I don't stop it or cut the scene and talk about it unless there's a moment where, like, I've had people on the verge of tears or cry, and I just keep going with the rehearsal. I keep letting them know that it's okay to feel that way and to use it in the next scene. Because if we stop and then we're all now turning and looking at the person who's on the edge of tears and already feeling bad about themselves, I personally, I won't speak for anyone else, but I personally don't think that's positive.
Right.
Because if you're someone, especially if someone who's dealt with depression like I have, you already think that the whole world is watching you and hates you.
Right.
So the one thing I don't want to do is
make a room full of people stare at you.
Yeah. But I will say this though, if I have had times where people have that breakthrough and get emotional and kind of like, I just don't know what's happening to me today. I have nothing to say, and I feel just ambivalent. Since everyone has already stopped, I'll let them say that, and I'll say, thank you so much for sharing that, and like, get ready, because here it comes. And then we just big group hug. Everyone just comes in and just hugs, and as long as it takes, whether we stand there for 15 seconds and then the person's like, all right, I'm fine, get off me, that kind of thing. Or if we just have to stand there for 5 minutes, just give that's the energy in the room. That's the truth in the room. I'd much rather keep the rehearsal going and let that person discover how to use that emotional truth in that moment, because that's as raw as they're probably ever going to be. So that'll be less scary when they're on stage, not that raw, like 10% of that type of raw, and it'll be confidence building for them, because like, look, rehearsal 2 weeks ago, you were a blubbering mess, and you still played a penguin who happened to be a blubbering mess, right? Tonight, think of how great that show was. Think of how great that cowboy character you played tonight when you were just kind of like annoyed.
Right.
Because that the stakes weren't as high, so it was easier or more comfortable for you to put that on. Yeah. That's just personally how I approach it. Every teacher has their own way of doing it, and if it works, it works. Right? That's just the way I do it.
Great. I'm wondering how you deal with people's frustration, maybe not from a emotional or mental standpoint, but just from a frustration of trying to perform and feeling like they're not getting what you're saying and don't understand it, and they're getting more and more frustrated. How do you help them get what you're saying and move forward in those sort of situations?
I remind them that it is something I got from Eric Honeycutt, and I really enjoy it. Eric Honeycutt is a teacher over at Iowa West. He teaches for Steppenwolf West. I think he's genius. I think he's one of the best improv teachers on the planet. I think he's one of the best we got. And it's an honor to call him a friend, and it means a lot to me that he respects me and considers me a peer. But one thing he said to me very early on, and I'm like totally in, he's like, there are no consequences on the stage, only revelations, and you don't have the right to use this art form to make yourself feel bad about yourself. So I start with that as a reminder right off the bat, and then remind them too that like, it's a process. It takes time. Improv is like golf or pool. You can play it until you're 80 and still learn new things and still be frustrated. So if you're frustrated at 23, boy, you better get used to that frustration being part of the process and failure being good, because you got another 60 years of this, man. Choose now how you want to process that. And I let them know that like, these are just reps. These are swinging a bat, and that rehearsals and workshops and practice is when you're supposed to fail, is when you're supposed to try things. Yeah. Like if I have a rehearsal and all my teammates were laughing and all of my stuff hit and I was the funniest guy in the room, I am fucking livid for weeks, because that means I didn't try anything. That means I never stepped out of my comfort zone. I just did stuff I didn't do anything that was scary. Right. That means I wasted an opportunity to get better. So usually when I say that, it's pretty hard for the student or the team member to like come back. Because if I'm saying that I would be livid if this wasn't happening to me, then they kind of have to just take it. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's interesting. Like, Uma ate a burger. Yeah.
You know, a lot of people do sort of hold back in practices, and that really is a place where you gotta go for it and be willing to just eat crap.
Yeah, it's the best. You're never going to get a better audience than your teammates. if you're not going to go vulnerable in front of your teammates, who are you going to go vulnerable in front of?
Yeah, you're certainly not going to do it in front of strangers on show night.
Yeah. Yeah, and I understand that there are certain folks, I get that, where people are like, oh, I could never have this conversation with my mom, but I can do it with a stranger in front of 100 other strangers. I get that, because I was a musician, and when I first started, it's easier to have a big crowd because it becomes sort of a wave, it becomes sort of faceless. But if you're, and so you can sort of just project over their heads and be that way, versus if there's 5 people in the crowd and still being that emotionally involved, because it's intimate and you can see the faces and you can see their eyes and you can see how they're reacting to it. So like, I understand that that's difficult for folks, but at the same time, like if you're in a practice and these are all like your friends and your teammates and people that you hang out with and get burgers with and go bowling and have movie nights, if you're not going to try and be vulnerable in front of them, who are going to keep your secrets, who are not going to talk about it outside that room, it's, you know, as soon as the second the practice is over, if the subject has dropped, they'll let you talk about it if you want to talk about it, because otherwise they're not going to.
Right.
If you're not going to do it there, then I don't. When will you ever do it? And that's an important part of this art form. You can't be a good improviser and a shitty friend, and you can't be a successful improviser if you're never willing to. What's Jill Bernard said this, and I thought it was great. Jill Bernard, another amazing genius improv teacher.
Yeah.
She when her one-person show Drum Machine that she's been doing forever and ever.
Yeah, she did it here.
Yeah, it's one of the early inspirations for me to do the 3 Insane Rituals. And what I take a little bit from her, I take a little bit from Valancourt, and a little bit from some other folks who I've seen do one-person shows. But the number one thing I took from Jill is the one that she said was like, I'm going out there and trying to break my own heart.
Yeah.
You know, like, so like if you're not willing to try and go out on stage and break your own heart, you're pretty much just assigning yourself to a plateau of improv that you'll never get past.
Yeah. Yeah, Jill Bernard is a fantastic improviser and a fantastic person.
Oh, yeah. Love that woman to death. Every time we see each other, it's like, ah!
Yeah.
But we're also probably as far away from each other on the improv spectrum as humanly possible. We can play together greatly, and all the stuff that she teaches, I'm like, absolutely, that works, and it's great and wonderful. But like I'm on the other. She's like, everything is a gift, and that's the wonderful thing about improv is that everything's a gift, and everything. And I'm like, yeah, but at the same time, like, you can drive a car with your feet. It doesn't make it a good idea. Doesn't make it. I think that's for me personally, just because I am Miles Jr. in the way you listen. But I have my own things too, like that I've evolved from Miles, and I believe in stuff that he doesn't believe. He believes one-person shows are masturbatory.
Yeah.
I don't think he would have any interest, desire, or maybe even any respect for the 3 Insane Rituals, the thing I do. I know he's never seen it. Right.
Right.
I'm about to upload the video from the one I did on Tuesday. I might send it to him because I know he'll watch it. He may rip me apart for it. I don't know. But I love the idea of efficiency. I love the idea of clarity.
Right.
Speed and clarity are the two things I really love. Being able to just turn like one, like if I could find a way to say one word and have it have 7 meanings, I'd be super happy. That's why I love the two wild and crazy guys from SNL. I fucking love that sketch for how efficient it is. It's the name of the sketch, it's the name of the characters, and it's the mantra, the thing that they say.
Yeah.
It doesn't get we are two wild and crazy guys. And just from saying that, you see it, you imagine it, you know the era that it was in the 70s and what it meant to be in that era, all the history of SNL, everything that has happened to Aykroyd and Steve Martin since then. It's just all there, just from saying that one phrase. I love shit like that. I'm dying to try and improvise something like that.
When it comes
to... Go ahead.
When it comes to your approach to improv and how you perform, what are your philosophies or your standards for strong improv?
For me, I think, again, it goes back to that statement, because I haven't thought of a better, more clear, more efficient way of doing it. Our job as improvisers to replicate recognizable human behavior and present it on the stage in such a way that the audience discovers their own humanity, reveals that revelation through the form of laughter, so we can have a longer discussion and deeper transaction of ideas on how to heal the world. Too long didn't read version, be interesting. You are interesting, be you. So I think I'm constantly going out there just trying to be as much me as possible, to be as I can play a character, and I can have all kinds of different affectations and a weird physicality and a voice inflection, and I got a facial expression that's all junked up, and I can play the point of view of that character, but they all come from me, right? If I'm going to play a guy, like for example, because I really like the dark stuff. That's where my head goes on that. I'm going to play a guy with Down syndrome, not as a joke, not as punching down. I'm going to try and play. I mean, my nephew is autistic, so it's certainly and I love him. He's great. That kid's going to be a genius. He's going to figure out something that's going to like turn sand into water, and we're just going to be great. Right? he's kind of that level, right? Right. But I'm going to play a believable, recognizable, realistic person with Down syndrome, and then so everyone goes, what? Okay, well, he's not doing the quote unquote retarded bit. Great. Okay. Oh, that's so sweet, right? Like, oh, that's nice. Like, oh, great. I have a cousin with autism. I'm going to do that. And you know what I'm going to do after that? I'm going to make that guy a dick. I'm going to make that kid with autism an asshole, right? And force you to like, well, how far is it? Because to me, and my father's disabled. My dad's walked on straight on crutches since 1978. I don't have any memories of my father that aren't with him, walking on the crutches, right? So I sort of know firsthand that the last thing that disabled people want to be treated as is different. Right. They don't see it. They don't see it as a disability. They see it as, just a sort of a fact of their life, right? One of the funniest people on the planet I know is Shannon DeVito out of Philadelphia. That chick is amazingly funny, and she uses her disability as part of her act. But like that's not what I think of when I think of Shannon first. I think of how funny she is. I think of what a humongous Cubs fan she is, and we talk about it back and forth. I think about how she looks exactly like my friend Eileen O'Connell, and I have this idea of making them sisters in this basketball pilot that I have because I think they would be hilarious bouncing off of each other. Right? So for me, I don't want to treat them as different, but I do want to go dark. So I'm like, yeah, do you hate this kid? I'm not saying that I hate kids with autism because I'm playing a stereotypical offensive autistic person. I'm going to play a realistic autistic person, and I want to make you hate them because they're an asshole. Right? I want to play that.
That's true equality.
My philosophy. Yeah.
That'll be true equality then.
Yeah, I want to hold up a mirror. The old man many years ago, he said, our job is to hold up a mirror to the audience, and if they don't like what they see, that's on them, not us.
True.
And that stuck with me. I was just like, all right. I'm sorry, are you uncomfortable? Do you not like this? I'm miming holding a mirror right now to the audience and leaning over the person in the front row. Like, oh, are you uncomfortable? Do you not like the feelings that you have? You hate this guy, don't you? But you don't want to say you hate him because he's autistic. And then you feel like people are going to judge you, and you don't want to be just forcing that. I've had people come up to me after shows furious with me, as if I was actually that person and not just playing a character. They're not, right. Like they're mad at that person. I just want to let you know that my sister dated a guy. And they're just telling me the story. I'm like, that's not me. I was playing a character.
Yeah.
If I was actually like that, you would never see that on stage because I would hide it from you because that's what villains do. Right. Villains don't try and convince you that they're villains. They try and convince you that they're great guys because they're villains.
Right.
Yeah. That's how I do it.
So for somebody who is getting along in their improv career, what is the process they can take to try to open up to be that real on stage? Is there a process that you take? Or is it just all the years of training?
Some of it is reps. Some of it is just everyone's wired differently. If you find something that works for you, do that. Some people like to take, it's just like in all of acting. I mean, you take something like, like 10 Little Indians, or Murder on the Orient Express, that movie. You've got like a dozen different people in that movie. Sean Connery and Albert Finney and all these different ones. They all have massively different approaches to the work. Right. Some people like, some people are like Mel Gibson, who can just like play pranks on the grips and kind of joke around right until the camera says action, and then he can turn to the camera and he can fucking cry, and he can get to that moment like that, and then they call cut. Yeah, his problems aside, I've always been a huge fan of Mel.
He's a great actor. And that's the thing. Someone can have problems and be a good director and a good actor. I mean, that's one of the things that Hamilton taught us, right? That musical taught us that someone can be terrible and have written something great. Like there was someone who was talking about one of the actors, and it was talking about Jefferson, and said, he can suck, but then he can also have written some great things that help our country. Both can be true.
Both of those things can be true. And then some people, I think it's just reps, and when you're ready, you're ready. That's you can if you want to be more vulnerable on stage, if you're actively thinking about that in your improv life and going like, I want to be more vulnerable on stage, then you're gonna seek out ways that will help you do that, right? You're gonna you're gonna stumble upon the way. If you're like, nah, I'm just going out there to be funny, well then you don't have that urge, you don't have that desire, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
That's just, again, there's nothing wrong with people. I've known plenty of improvisers who go like, hey, look, man, I'm not going out there to try and change the world. I'm just going out there trying to be funny. That's great. That is what you want out of it, and that is what you're going to get.
Right. You do you, and I'll do me. That's there needs to be some equal acceptance of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think what happens usually is that usually an improviser will stumble upon that on stage, and they have that great moment, and then of vulnerability where they're like actually feeling those emotions, and the audience is dead quiet because they're into it. I mean, like they are wrapped with attention, and then it happens, and then they walk off stage after that scene, for sure, definitely after the show where they have time to process it, and they spend the rest of their time chasing that dragon. And then they will find whatever way works for them to get them to that sort of emotional vulnerability each time out the gate. I had that, and my moment was in Phoenix. Oh fuck, probably like 7-8 years ago, maybe more. Me and Miles did our 2-person show in Phoenix, and I got to the point where I was crying real tears on stage, and I looked over, and Miles looked at me, and he had this small, very very subtle, very small moment. I think only because I was on stage with him, but also because how well I know him, caught it. But then it was just a brief moment glimpse, and then we kept moving on. And then afterwards, he was like, "Yeah, I looked over you and saw that you were crying real tears." And I went, "Oh, I'm not as committed as O'Connell is. I need to up my fucking game." He's like, "I got to bring my A game." And I remember that moment, and then how that was his way of saying that he was proud of me. And I was like, that for me, that's the moment I'm chasing, that sort of moment all the time. I want to feel that again all the time. Where I wasn't trying to do it. It just happened. And then to see my mentor, one of my best friends on the planet, have that brief moment of like, oh, no one thinks about improv more than the old man. He's the greatest improv teacher on the planet, living, easily, hands down. And to have that brief moment where he was like, this man is committed more to this art form than I am right now. That meant the world to me. So
that's a really great story. Well, there's plenty we can talk about. I'd probably have to have another episode with you, but we're at the end of this one.
I fucking talk a lot.
I love it. That's what I love about this podcast. I would like to try to come up with something, maybe a process that people can take on how they can learn to find their standards and how they can find their own way to dig in and move forward in their journey as an improviser. Does that sound like a good idea?
That's a very good idea. I think I may actually already have an answer for that.
Yeah, I kind of do too. One thing that I did when I was in like junior high or something like that, I said, I'm in Spartanburg, South Carolina. I'm not going to be able to study with in a great theater like Juilliard or something. So my thing, and this is similar to what I heard you were talking about doing at I.O., was I just watched things a lot. I would watch movies and TV shows and study their process and hear them in interviews talk about their process. That's one thing I suggest people do all the time, is to watch things not merely for entertainment, but also to learn how people do it. Like, what's that pace? What's that rhythm? So that's one thing I would throw out there.
For sure. I like, I know this sounds crazy, but I encourage improvisers to watch family-friendly movies starring animals. Like the straight to video, the puppy that saved Christmas, because there's also the puppy that saved Halloween, the puppy that saved Easter, the puppy, Air Bud, soccer dog, most valuable primate, monster dog, right? Any of those, not like there's one where it's a girl and a chihuahua have to enter into a dance contest to save like a beauty parlor. I shit you not, because those movies. You talk about anything like, yeah, you can laugh at them ironically if you want to, but really the reason why Russellmania, the one where it's a Jack Russell Terrier who's a wrestler, right?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, you have to watch those because you can set your watch to those. You'll see how there is a pattern through each one of those shows, each one of those movies, that they are following all basically the same script. And once you realize that since they're all following that same, I think there's like fucking 7 Air Buds, right? Once you notice that they're all following that same script and they still work and it's still useful, then you go like, you are also allowed to use that type of pattern because people respond to it. It's not safe. It's not cheap. It's not easy. It works.
Right.
You have to discover why it works. And then me, of course, because I go to the dark stuff. Once you've watched that and realize that you've watched, the puppy that saved Christmas, the puppy that saved fill in the blank. You watched all those movies. Then you have to realize that that's not the same puppy,
right?
Because puppies don't stay that size very long,
right?
And then one more step after that, where he gets really into BOC land. That first puppy is dead now because dogs don't live that long, right? That dog is dead now. You were watching and clapping and making fun of a dead dog. How do you feel about yourself now? But maybe if you don't want to do that, I always tell people new into improv, especially for like a question like that, go to your bookshelf and pick 3 books at random. They're books that you bought, books that you kept that mean something to you. Flip through them. See things that like sort of, if you want to underline them or if you want to dog ear it or put in, and then after you've done that, just take a second and think of like, you know what, they all probably have some sort of commonality.
Mm-hmm.
The first commonality is that they're your books. You bought them. You own them. Someone gave them to you because they thought that you would like it. Right? It all comes from you. There's probably more in that book, improv training and improv history for you than any of the actual improv training and technique and workshops you've done, especially because those books were around. They were part of you probably before you knew what improv was.
Yeah.
That's what I do. There's certain books that I read every year because they're the best books about improv, written about improv that are not about improv. In the Blink of an Eye by Walter Murch, the Tao of Jeet Kune Do by Bruce Lee, the Bushido Code, the Warrior's Way of the Samurai. I read that. I read the Bushido Code probably 4 times a year because I think it's the most well-written book about improv that's not about improv.
Wow.
Yeah.
Those are some good reads. They sound like really good reads. One thing I like to do that's, and it's total happenstance. There are just times if I'm at the gym and I'm working out and the TV's on or somewhere, I might see a movie or TV show, but I can't hear it. Mm-hmm. But I'm still watching it, and you can still pick up on what's happening just because they're acting with their body. Good actors act with their body, their whole body. So not just their face, but you see from the way they're moving around, you're seeing what the story is, and you're not hearing any of the dialogue. A lot of times there's not a closed caption to read, but you're still picking up on, he's breaking up on her.
100%, and very good direction, right? Because of the shot selection and the editing.
Yeah.
Very early on, like many years ago, I got the pleasure of meeting Bill Duke, who was in Predator, and I'm a huge John McTiernan fan. So I was like, I'm going to pick your fucking brain. He's like, John McTiernan. He's like, is genius. John McTiernan is a cinematic. That man is a master of cinematic. Yep, and he did Predator. He was like, John McTiernan is the master. He was a master of cinematic language. He was like, do this. Go home. Watch Predator. I was like, I've watched Predator 1,000 times. I know that. He was like, yeah. Watch Predator with the sound off. He was like, you still understand 85% of that movie. You don't hear the dialogue, you know what I'm saying? And I did, and he's a fucking 100% right. People look at each other, you know exactly how they feel about each other, the close-ups, the choices that they make. You watch Bill Duke hate Carl Weathers until the moment where they have to set it aside to kill this fucking alien. You can't, their lips are moving, you can't hear it, but just the eyes, the expression on their face, and the way that McTiernan shot it and lit it, you know exactly what's happening. The first time that Carl Weathers and Arnold Schwarzenegger meet, where they do the fucking the handshake with a death grip, and they're just seeing who gives first and all that. It tells you right up top in that moment, Carl Weathers is going to betray that guy because he's weak, right? Like it's brilliant. You watch Predator without the sound on, with the sound off, and you're just like, holy shit. It's amazing. It's easy to do it, which is also a good way for improvisers to remind themselves that improv scene doesn't start when people start talking.
Right.
There's no law that says an improv scene has to have dialogue to be successful. It really doesn't.
Sounds like a good stopping point. There it is.
Yeah.
That was great. Thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, man. And yeah, if we need to do another one of these again in the future to cover all the stuff, because I'm sure you and I could talk for another 3 hours about it.
I'd love to.
Feel free, man.
I think we all know that I'm definitely going to be having him on again and would truly love to have him on again. I'm really thankful he did that. He was great, and he had a lot of good stuff. He's really tapping into something unique because he's able to just watch all these great people and study what they're doing and learning under all these great people for the last 13 years. Now he is teaching all these great people and doing all these amazing things. I mentioned he's at I.O. He's also at the Pack Theater. So check out both, packtheater.com, ioimprov.com. You can see his shows for sure, but you can see some others as well. And check out a group he's a part of, Dr. God Comedy. You can check out their website, drgodcomedy.com. That's one of those things we'll definitely have to talk about next time I have him on. Follow everyone on Twitter at B3OC and at There It Is Pod and at Jason Farr Jokes. Follow us all. Go to thereitispod.com to find out how you can support the podcast and deal with your there-itis. There-itis, it's the desire for more episodes of There It Is. The only medication is more There It Is. Also, check out old episodes and blogs on the website. Well, there it is, another episode of There It Is. Next week's episode will be another fun and informative one, so do come back and check it out. Until next time, be good to each other.
The music for the theme song was created by Neil Brooks. The rap was written and performed by Nick Acevedo. The logo for There It Is was created by Jeff Prater. The There It Is podcast is produced by Jason Farr.